So we live in really interesting times. If you think about what technology has done for society over the last 10 or 20 years, there are really some big changes, some very disruptive changes in the way we're living that come as the result of new innovation and new technology. Just think about taxis. The world's largest taxi company owns no cars. It's Uber. But they now are leading the world in terms of developing driverless, autonomous vehicles. Think of hotels. The world's largest hotel company, Airbnb, owns no buildings. Technology is at the core of what's driving those disruptive changes. I'm from Pittsburgh, and in Pittsburgh we understand this kind of disruptive innovation perhaps better than any other region in the world. If you look at what's happened in Pittsburgh, we used to be known as the City of Steel. There were steel mills in the 1930s, the 40s, the 50s. And then innovation came along and mini mills were developed in other countries. And within the space of 5 or 10 years, an entire steel industry within our region began to collapse. And so you can see the sort of lights and the shadows. Steel became cheaper. We could build bigger buildings for less money and develop and do new things. But the status quo, the old mills, collapsed and the industry collapsed around them. For the most part, this drives really important societal change. In healthcare, in particular, this is an industry that's desperately in need of positive disruption, of changing the trajectory of where things are. And if we can find the right technology, if we can understand how that technology can enable us to transform care from what really is today an art form into an information science, where we're making decisions that are not just based on judgment, but based on data that we believe in that's accurate, then finally we'll be able to deliver to patients and to people the right care at the right time, at the right place and cost. That's really what we're all about, and disruptive health technology is one of the underpinnings, one of the threads that one needs to weave to create a tapestry of that bright future. So how important is technology, and to what degree is technology the solution for the problems we have in healthcare today, where for the most part, quite often, we deliver the wrong care at the wrong time, place, and cost? Well, it turns out it's not a simple thing. If you actually look at the availability of technology to people in the United States, for example, what you see is that there's really strong availability of great technology. Those technologies, however, have not really driven a great increase in the quality and the effectiveness and in the efficiency of healthcare. So perhaps what we need to do is identify disruptive technologies, technologies that could actually deliver care at the right time, place, and cost, but do so whilst simultaneously increasing the affordability, the simplicity, the quality, and the accessibility of healthcare solutions. Why has this been so difficult to achieve? One of the reasons is that in healthcare, I think, and this is just my opinion, people tend to get together, and it's rather like people getting together in a dark room. They can't find the way out. So they say, okay, well, head in that direction. They just go off in that direction because they believe they can find the future. But healthcare is a little bit of a problem because we're not even sure what the right questions are that we need to answer, let alone what the right answers are. So the right way to find the future of healthcare, to really disruptively innovate in healthcare, is actually to get together in teams, to understand each other's perspectives, and to perform small steps, to take small steps in multiple directions until somebody finds the right set of answers, and then quickly be in a position to say, okay, it's this way. We need to follow in this direction in order to be able to disruptively innovate in healthcare. Carnegie Mellon University back in 2013, we actually launched the Disruptive Health Technology Institute in order to be able to hunt for and mine some gems and pull out the gems of technology that we believed could create this underpinning for disruptive health technology innovation. We did this in a very unique partnership with Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, a large insurance company, health insurance company, and its associated health delivery network, the Allegheny Health Network, a large health system in the Pittsburgh area. So by combining a provider of healthcare, a payer for healthcare, and a large world-class research university, we believe that we would have the necessary components to find technology, to invent new technology that didn't exist, to solve important problems that at the same time, again, would increase the affordability, the simplicity, the quality, and the accessibility of healthcare solutions. We've been at this for a while now, and we've got a really interesting portfolio of projects. I'd encourage you to visit our website at www.dhti.cmu.edu and read about these portfolios of technologies. In some ways, what we're trying to do is look inside the crystal ball and predict and identify what are the commonalities between truly disruptive technologies that can cause the kind of change that the Uber technology has created for automotive industries. Looking in the crystal ball is risky because you can do it wrong. You can pick the wrong things. But that's okay, because at DHTI, our goal is not to succeed in everything that we do, but instead to try hard enough at the fringes between technology, science, engineering, and healthcare, so that every now and again we find those crystals. There are many technologies that are possibly disruptive in healthcare. And we could talk about each of them a great deal and ad infinitum. And again, I encourage you to go to our website and read about some of the important things, whether it's computational healthcare, digital health, remote monitoring, personalized medicine. And I'm going to touch on a few of those here over the next few minutes. But before doing that, I just want to sort of give you a quick scan of what those projects are in the DHTI major project portfolio. We're pushing about 3 to 5 of these kinds of technologies per year, and we do this and we look for projects that can have a significant impact within a 2 to 3 year time horizon. So is there an elephant in the room here that we're not talking about so far that might be seen as a barrier to the adoption of these kinds of technologies if they make it? And the elephant in the room is indeed the payer for healthcare. Two groups pay for healthcare, the individual that's receiving it, and oftentimes that's paid to some degree by an employer or an insurance company. So the payers of healthcare are typically not involved in the innovations and in choosing the innovations that will change healthcare. For the most part, that's scientists, it's engineers, innovators, and providers, doctors that work together to develop those kinds of solutions. But the payer is in the room, just sitting quietly until the end of the process, and what happens is quite often the payer can decide, you know what, this isn't quite what we were looking for, and there's going to be a problem reimbursing people who are using this innovative solution. So at DHTI, because DHTI is fundamentally a different kind of organization, what we're doing is looking for disruptive innovations that the payer themselves would be excited about from the beginning of the process. So in other words, the payer is saying, look, these are the problems that we're experiencing in healthcare and that we want you to solve. And then the faculty at Carnegie Mellon University, in collaboration with the provider network and with people around the country, are saying, here are some solutions. Here are some solutions. So I'm just going to pick a couple of examples of things that are potentially, I think, really disruptive, and talk about how one can work with them in the context of working together with a payer. One of the things that happened after DHTI was established was that Highmark, a particularly far-sighted insurance company, understood that there were technologies that were sitting out there that they would want to have accelerated and adopted, but where there was a gap between whether they were proven or not today versus tomorrow. So they established at Highmark an innovation testing program. They called it VITAL, called the Verification of Innovation through Testing, Analysis, and Learning. And they picked very carefully a couple of technologies that they believed were really highly potentially disruptive. We're going to talk about a few of those as examples of the kinds of disruptive technologies that could make a big difference in healthcare. The first one I'm going to talk about is a technology called HeartFlow. HeartFlow addresses a really big problem for patients and providers and payers. That problem is that if we have chest pain and we go to a hospital, there's a whole series of imaging, testing modalities, things that are done to us. We've probably all heard of nuclear stress tests. There's a whole series of those kinds of tests that are done to predict whether we need to go to a cath lab and get a stent placed. Well, it turns out that when we get sent for those tests, 90% of the time, there was nothing wrong with us. The test shows that there's nothing wrong with us. 10% of the time, the test shows, there is something wrong. You're probably going to need a stent. You should go to the cath lab. But when people get to the cath lab, 70% of them find they were perfectly healthy. That test was not predictive enough of the need for a stent, and they leave the cath lab. This means that 70% of the volume in that cath lab, if you could figure out who the right 70% were, don't need to be there. Wouldn't need to be spending their time, taking the risk, spending the investment it takes to deliver that kind of therapy. So HeartFlow, which was developed out in the San Francisco region, is a very simple technology. It uses computational fluid dynamics to take an image of the heart, run it through a supercomputer, and calculate from that image whether someone is likely to need a stent or not. Turns out it's been quite successful, and it's now ready for adoption, and it was one of the first technologies that was placed in this VITAL program at Highmark in order to assess to what degree it really proves that it can work at keeping the right patients out of the cath lab and placing the right patients into the cath lab. So this, if it works, is a truly disruptive technology. The implementation of this technology just at a single large payer like Highmark could save Highmark on the order of $400, $500 million a year in costs, make sure that the physicians in the cath labs are focusing their full attention on the people that really need to be there, and of course helping patients' lives by making sure they get the right care at the right time, at the right place, and the right cost. The whole goal of disruptive health technology. Another good example that made it into the VITAL program, a highly selective process, is a device called the LYNX device. It's made by a company called Torax. It's a very simple device. It's designed to prevent GERD, so heartburn that comes from reflux from our stomach when our stomach acid goes up into our swallowing tube, the esophagus. There are all sorts of problems that result from GERD. This device, the LYNX device, simply is a magnetic band that goes around the sphincter in between the esophagus and the stomach and essentially strengthens the muscles in that sphincter artificially, thereby hopefully preventing GERD. There's a lot of cost that takes place from people who have recalcitrant GERD or esophageal reflux disease, and a lot of cost in medication and, of course, a bad quality of life for those patients. So if a device like this, which is very simply minimally invasively put inside the body, can make a big difference, again, you can see disruptive change with a simultaneous improvement and increase in affordability and quality and simplicity and thereby accessibility. Another good example is for patients who have panic disorder. When patients have panic disorder, oftentimes they'll have breathing attacks. They'll feel like they're going to have a heart attack. So they go to the emergency room, they can't breathe, they're feeling chest pain. What happens? Well, they may get diagnosed as needing to go to the cath lab or going to get nuclear stress tested. And we've already heard about the challenges in that area. Well, it turns out that some folks down at Stanford, again out on the West Coast, discovered that the breathing attacks for people with panic disorder happened because they weren't breathing right all the time. So a little startup company out in that region called PAH Life Sciences invented something called FreeSpira, a very simple device that just measures the quality of someone's breathing and then retrains them to breathe normally all the time, so that if they experience something that would cause them to panic, it will still cause them to panic, but it won't trigger the breathing attack that happens. If you're able to do that and actually cure somebody, have a long-term effect from simply a 30-day treatment of training them to breathe properly, you'll have a really significant impact, again, simultaneously on the quality, the affordability, the simplicity of their care. So really what we're talking about from a payer perspective is how do health insurance companies become health insurance companies? How do they transition from being just the payer to being a key representative of their members' health and wellness and wealth to some degree? Let's touch on a few of the other kinds of technologies that we're really interested in at Carnegie Mellon University and that are sort of really have the potential to improve health broadly and in a transformative way, and that have the potential to be highly disruptive. One of those is something that I've been interested in for a long time, and that's called regenerative medicine. It's the idea of using cells to treat injury and disease. We have this natural capacity to heal ourselves, but oftentimes it doesn't take place fast enough in order to be relevant in the face of the disease that we're dealing with. But we all know that if we scratch our skin, it heals. If we break a bone, it heals. So how can scientists learn what those mechanisms are that drive that kind of healing, and how can they accelerate them to a clinically relevant time scale? This is happening a lot. It's really exciting stuff. I'm just going to give you a few examples, just a little teaser to kind of show you where we are. This is an example called CART therapy. It's a cell-based therapy to treat cancer. It's showing great promise. The idea is pretty straightforward. Take immune cells from a patient, retrain them and retool them outside the body, essentially in a bioreactor, and then give them back to the patient. But now those cells have been retrained to recognize that patient's own cancer cells, and therefore the body will now reject those cancer cells, kill them, and shrink the tumor. In really exciting work coming out of the University of Pennsylvania and now all around the world, people are showing remarkable results, particularly with what are called soluble tumors, the tumors of the blood, where, for instance, in a small clinical trial with 20 or so patients, the leukemia complete response rate was around 90%. Really significant, really exciting, transformative, and disruptive. And this kind of technology, the cell-based technology, has the strength within it, and the scientific strength within it, to actually cure disease versus treat symptoms. Another example of that is a very rapidly moving fast field called whole organ engineering. It's an area where people here at Carnegie Mellon University have been working for a long time and are really interested in pursuing. The idea is phenomenally simple. Take an organ, remove all of the cells from that organ, and just get left with the infrastructure. It's a little bit like the idea of, say, if you wanted to rebuild a city, take the city, remove all of the buildings, but leave behind the infrastructure, the power sources, the highway, or all the sewage systems. Leave those behind and then just go ahead and build new buildings. That's now the way that we're looking at regrowing and rebuilding organs like kidney, liver, heart, lungs, brain, if you want to go that far. And what we've seen now over the last decade is significant advances where people have been able to grow functional organs by taking an existing organ, removing all of the cells, re-injecting new healthy cells, and regrowing a new healthy organ. Another area where there's sort of great excitement about what can be achieved are diagnostics that actually work, diagnostics that really tell us what's going on. Just a couple of examples. There's a device out in New Zealand being made by a company called SIFT, and that device is being used to analyze our health through our breath. So it turns out every time we breathe out all sorts of interesting signals. Those signals can be guideposts to informing us as to things that are wrong. SIFT is a company that was detecting explosives at airports from the air. And now what they're doing is developing the science and the underpinning that will allow one to detect changes in breath in order to determine health. Very exciting new kinds of diagnostics. Another thing that we're all well aware of is if we get some kind of bacterial infection, we don't know right away what is causing it, and therefore we don't know right away how to treat it. So there are now all sorts of DNA fingerprinting type technologies which are being developed in order to fingerprint bacteria really quickly, within hours instead of within days, in order to be able to then deliver the right kinds of antibiotics. Other areas that I think are really exciting, nanomedicine, very tiny pieces of technology that can be put in the body to do interesting things. A good example is something called Proteus Digital Health. Sounds very complicated, but it really isn't. All it is a little microchip that is added to pills, every individual pill, and it's very smart. It turns out that when you take the pill, the stomach acids activate the microchip, turn on a little mini battery that allows that RFID tag on that pill to talk to a little patch that the patient wears, just like a small sensing device, that then tells an app that you've taken that pill. And when you took it, it of course knows. When you should have taken it, it knows. So it allows patients to improve the medication adherence, how effectively they're taking their medication. You may think, wow, this sounds really far-fetched. This kind of technology is a long way from application. It turns out it's not. It turns out that the FDA's already approved this RFID tag, the size of the head of a pin, really, that goes on pills that are used for heart failure, for Alzheimer's, for transplant patients, where their medication adherence is particularly important for how well they're going to be over a long period of time. So exciting stuff in the area of sort of micro machines, nano machines, very tiny pieces of engineering, the kind of tiny pieces of engineering that are being developed here at Carnegie Mellon. One of the particular challenges in this area is that these kinds of micro RFID tags are not secure in terms of their communication. So anyone can read what they're saying. So one of the professors here at Carnegie Mellon, working with the Disruptive Health Technology Institute, Professor Carley, is actually developing micro RFID tags that can communicate securely with the readers. Important stuff. Just beginning to wrap up with this sampling of exciting, potentially disruptive technologies, I want to talk a little bit about what I call panomic-driven care. I think we've heard of genomics, metabolomics, proteomics, all these different kind of omics. And basically what those omics are, you can think of them as dictionaries that allow one to read an individual's chemistry and understand how that chemistry might affect their health and how to treat their health. So genetics are incredibly important in understanding, for instance, what drugs a patient should take and how much a patient should take. And so if you do genetic testing on people, you can understand, for instance, whether they metabolize drugs quickly or slowly. If they metabolize them quickly, you need to treat them with either higher doses or more frequently. If they metabolize slowly, quite the opposite. Imagine the impact that this has, for instance, on opioid medications, painkillers, where people are becoming addicted. If we don't know how long the painkillers will reside in their body, we can't accurately and properly dose those patients correctly. So it turns out new technology exists to look at the genetics. It's simple technology, it's relatively inexpensive, somewhere between a few $100s and less than $1,000. You can actually get the fingerprint of an individual, and from that fingerprint, you can do intelligent prescribing. One company that's doing this is YouScript. We've developed maybe the smartest software platform that exists to be able to take genetic information and then figure out what are the drug-drug interactions that could cause a problem for a patient and what are the drug-gene interactions that could cause a problem for a patient. This kind of personalized medicine really represents the future of healthcare. And because the cost of looking at genetics in individual patients is dropping so significantly, literally now you can do the whole genome sequence of an individual for less than $1,000, the cost of personalized medicine is now really something that makes it exciting. So to wrap up, many people have tried to disrupt healthcare. And unfortunately, the valley of death between an idea and its adoption and all of those innovative things is littered with the skeletons of great ideas that never made it to patients. There are many reasons why. That can be the topic for another discussion and another time. But one of the biggest ones is that the people involved, the payers, the providers, the different kinds of doctors, the different kinds of scientists, and the patients, they really speak quite different languages. They don't necessarily communicate with each other awfully effectively. So it's a little bit like a whole bunch of blind people that are looking at an elephant by touching it. They're all looking at the same elephant, but depending on where they touch that elephant, they may think that the elephant's a snake, or a spear, or a rope, or a tree, but not an elephant. The only way they could tell it was an elephant is they actually talked to each other, worked with each other, and listened to each other's perspectives. At DHTI, that's what we're trying to do, because in healthcare, it's the same problem. Depending on where the perspective of the person comes from, they may look at a problem in healthcare and they may say, you know what, this is a clinical problem, or this is a data problem, or this is a sort of platform problem. If they're not working together, if payers, providers, innovators, scientists, and engineers are not working together, they'll never be able to solve those problems really effectively. So DHTI, the Disruptive Health Technology Institute, was designed to be a place where those conversations, those kinds of networks can be built, and where we can investigate and invent the future of healthcare through the development of disruptive health technologies. So thank you.